We'll turn to our next topic. 4 years ago, the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis set off a global movement. Protests all over, laws to ban chokeholds, questions about police funding, pairing mental health counselors with cops. Corporations promised $200 billion for racial justice, but we don't hear much about those initiatives now. Michael, where are we after 4 years?
Well, I've got one word for this, and it's called backlash, right? Every time in America, when America tries to show some sense of egalitarianism toward black Americans, there's a backlash. It's nothing new, right? Coming out of Reconstruction, 1877, the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, all those ideas, right? Ending enslavement, due process, the right to vote for black males. Whenever America makes an egalitarian move, there's a backlash, right? We had Jim Crow in response to Reconstruction. 19 years later, we had 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, the doctrine of separate but equal coming out of the Supreme Court. 1954, Brown versus Board, desegregating American schools. What happens 3 years later? We have the bloody riots in Arkansas when they tried to integrate Arkansas schools. We go to 64.
This is just normal.
Right, we go to 64 to 65, the passage of the Civil Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Act, deadly riots in the South. The South swings from Democrat to Republican. For the sake of time, I'll go to the election of Barack Obama and the creation of the Tea Party movement. Post-George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, the censorship of black books, the attack on critical race theory, the dismantling of DEI, the dismantling of affirmative action, the reconfiguration of AP history courses. All of these backlashes set the climate for something that we don't appreciate enough. All these ideas set the climate for the idea that race is no longer an appropriate discussion for policy analysis. So of course, the entities that did not want to do these things in the first place, they're reneging on their performative ideas at the time, and it's a perfect crime scene without the tape. The only good thing to come out of this moment is that many black Americans are now starting to understand this notion of invisible Jim Crow, these contemporary ideological threats to their internal security, right? Which may lead to a more pronounced collective efficacy in the black experience. That's the only good thing that comes out of this. And I say this really quickly. If you look at the record numbers of enrollments for HBCUs, that's a bellwether to let you know that black America is paying attention.
Because enrollment is going up.
Absolutely, it's off the charts.
I mean, you summed up exactly what I kind of wrote there, and I will sum it up with the Leon Bridges song from Gold Diggers, and it says, "Hoping for a life more sweeter, instead I'm just a story repeating." And that's the story that's repeating, that every time black Americans have gained an iota of, and their allies have fought for an iota of freedom, there is this white supremacist backlash against black Americans, women primarily also, and poor people, and it's a no-brainer. So now what is happening? Now what is happening is acute levels of epistemological violence, right? We are going to write in school textbooks that slavery was somehow beneficial to a person because they gained skills, right? Like as if physical abuse makes you stronger, that kind of a weird argument. And the Republican Party is headed towards that, right? Republican Party now, by all objective counts, they resemble the far-right Nazi outfits like AfD in Germany than the Conservative Party in Britain, right? So we have one part of the United States as a backlash of, protest against police brutality, tremendous levels of police brutality in the United States, which still continues. Police killed about 1,150 people last year, or I was just seeing in Guardian and stuff like that. So, but I do think that since the material conditions have changed, like social media and stuff like that, the ability to organize against these kinds of patriarchy, this kind of white supremacist, vitriol, for the lack of a better word, that is much more pronounced. I saw the most wonderful multiracial protest by young people after George Floyd, which was not seen before, right? So I think there is some important change happening. But the backlash, of course, would be there. That's a part of the American DNA.
Well, please ask you. Well, one of the interesting things is that I think we have seen exactly this backlash, this white supremacist backlash against Black Lives Matter, against police reform, but we have seen some incremental police reforms that have largely not gone to ending racial profiling or racialized violence or targeting of Black Americans. They've gone to do things like support mental health response teams for people who are unhoused. And that's a good thing. We want that. So we have seen some incremental changes. Denver, for example, has this support team assisted response. If someone's having a mental health crisis, armed police are not the first responders anymore. People who can actually spend hours helping provide services for someone are coming in and helping. And that came out of, after the murder of George Floyd. I think what's going to be interesting is how some of these initial experiments play out over the next few years to think about how policing changes over time. But I completely agree with Michael and Anirban about what's happening.
And in terms of law enforcement, it's largely a local prerogative, right? So from the macro perspective, I think you did a great job laying out the historical contours. But when you look at what some localities are doing, I think there has been some modest policy progress. You mentioned mental health. I also think the use of police cameras, studies have showed that those have grown. As those have grown, there's been greater documentation of instances of brutality. And obviously that was related to the George Floyd case. It's led to better handling of misconduct, right? It's led to more training for police officers. It's led to the lessening of racial disparity and the resolving of misconduct, the use of cameras. So certainly that's not going to fix all the problems, but I do think there has been some small policy gains over the last few years.
Some gains, corporations doing some things.
Policy gains, okay, fine, but we still have goon squads in Mississippi. Yep. And I have to live with that reality as soon as I walk out of this studio every day.
Yeah, but you know, Camden did some good job. There's a good film about Camden, the story of police reform progress. But yeah, the goon squad, like, you know, here is a squad operating with impunity by basically torturing black people with no consequences. And even the new chat records that came out, many of the deputies are still in their jobs, right? And it's unbelievable what these people did for years and years and years. And
violence against black Americans is an intractable part of the American spirit. Yeah. And as soon as we accept that reality, something real can happen.
And let's hope something real will happen to change those things. We haven't come as far as we wanted. I hear you saying some good things and some things, many things yet to work on.